I think it's actually not there. Okay. So I put some books out on the back for people to look at as well.
And they'll be listed at the end of this presentation. Okay. Thank you. Susan.
I'm Susan Falkoff. I'm a member of the Town Council and with an avid interest in horticulture and trees. And since I've been on the Town Council, we have made some progress. And the next slide shows some places we've improved. I hope it's big enough for you to see, but the picture on the left, somebody put cement right up to the base of the tree. There's no place for water. That tree is not going to survive. And many years ago, in the way distant past, long ago, but not too long ago, this practice was allowed all over town. It's no longer allowed. The town put up this tree on a planting strip. Some homeowner or their contractor made the conditions that were not going to allow that tree to live. If you saw that condition now and called the Public Works Department, they would take that cement away. And more than that, if you bought that home, and you said to them, please take up all that cement and plant grass for me, they will do that. And it took some getting to get to that place, but we're there, and I'm proud of that achievement. We've also made inroads in the way we plow roads, using less salt in the winter. People have sent me pictures of salt that's like on the sidewalk and on their front walk and way over. And we've really made an effort to rein that in and use better technology to make the salt go just as much salt as you need, no more, and where you want it to go. Now, you talked about, and curbs. Thank you for mentioning that, Peter. So when you talk about making a curriculum about trees, what you wouldn't want to do is just have a science class about trees. A good curriculum means that you also have math class about the width of a tree, and you have people write about trees, and maybe you read, I was thinking about Burnham Wood Comes to Dunsinane, and have the kids read Macbeth, and or A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. So like that, it's not that we need more tree warden. What we need is tree thinking in every department in town. The more I thought about this talk and listened to other people on the panel, the more I realized how integrated this needs to be in town. So I don't know if you can see it, but we have the tree warden up at the top, and he's got a really important role, but he needs the support of other town departments. He needs the town manager to make sure there's enough money to plant and take care of the trees. The planning department looks at site reviews for projects. Are they thinking about trees? Are they thinking about big trees? Are they thinking about ways to avoid cutting down trees? The webmaster needs to keep information up to date, and there's forms you can fill out to communicate. I think it's really important that somebody is responsible for being sure that gets followed up on. Recreation, I'll get to Victory Field. That it's important that the recreation department understand we don't only need soccer fields, as Elizabeth was saying. We also need trees. And listening to Elizabeth, I really appreciate that point about you don't want to watch your kids in a playground if it's in the middle of a hot field, but it's very pleasant if there's a bench under a tree. The schools, talked about curriculum. Public Works Department, you know, it's ironic. I think I was chosen for this panel because I'm the chair of the Public Works Subcommittee. But the more I thought about it, the more I thought this is really about Public Works. It's about everything. So Public Works, however, needs to think about trees when they plan road projects. What about the roots? What about the putting the conditions that are going to allow the trees to thrive that we pay to plant there? And the police has gotten really interested lately in enforcing, there's a new regulation, there's a $50 fine for planting on the planting strip.
Parking.
Parking. You can plant, you can't park. And the police are really interested in enforcing that now. And the health department, you know, tends to see health very narrowly, but as Mari was saying, trees are a very important part of health. All of that depends on citizen activism and oversight. And last night, when I went to the budget hearing, there was a poster in the posted in the wall. It has a slide, and I have the real thing. It says, "Dear Mike Driscoll." And what I love is it doesn't say Mr. Driscoll. "Dear Mike Driscoll, please don't cut down the trees." And it's signed by, you probably know these children.
I do.
You probably know them.
It would be a conspiracy at work here.
She didn't know that was going to appear tonight, but I just love it. So it's nice to see the next generation of activists becoming active.
It was my
Susan
sister's
called me up early this morning and said, wait, stop the presses. We have this action moment coming on. Okay, so what we're about to do now is have first some commentary back and forth among the panelists, and then move to you in the audience.
Okay, so as I said, what I want to accomplish now is getting some good cross-conversation going. What we've got here is just obviously an amazing diversity of different perspectives and experience that I want to begin by getting them to go back and forth at each other a bit. But then I know that there is a comparable wealth of experience out in the audience, so that I will shortly turn and ask for questions and comments from you. But let me just open it up across the panel. What do you want to know from each other, or what do you want to tell each other about the wackiness of the presentations you just heard? Mari.
I'd like to know what our tree canopy coverage is in Watertown and what a goal might be for us to get to. So, Peter, can you?
Well, we need Chris here, Chris Hayward, our tree warden. That is using the GIS technology. That's a pretty easy figure to come up with. So I just don't know what it is, actually. But I think with Mount Auburn Cemetery and with the river and Oakley, Clover Golf Course, where, I would think it's probably approaching 20–25%, but I don't know.
It turns out that the software that Ken referred to and used for some of his calculations, and I've got listed as the bottom issue here, at least before it did whatever it's doing there. This thing called iTree, major production out of the U.S. Forest Service, a lot of independent university groups and so on. There's a version you can just sign on to the web and do your own home, the way Ken was doing it, and I recommend you all do that. It's mind-bogglingly simple and very illuminating. You can plant a tree on one side of your house and see what it would turn into and how much it would save you. But the heavy end of that is a back end that goes after this question. It lets you zoom in for any municipality in the United States, outline it, and then drawing on existing Landsat, GIS coverage, Google Maps, and so on, do first approximations of what's your forest cover now, what was it earlier, and so on. And that takes a little more time to get used to, but I did half a weekend and was using these things. So I recommend, just as a set of projects any one of us might get involved in or might be part of the upper end of that curriculum. To go after these sites.
It makes me curious because I happen to live on a street that is suffering from the trees don't live forever problem. And we had 4 major trees within 6 houses taken down last summer. And to Ken's earlier point, it changed our neighborhood. And so it would be curious just to see how are we doing. And yes, those trees are being replaced, but will they be shade trees in my lifetime?
Very nice. Other comments?
I would like to just comment to this panel and the audience that I don't think I expressed how serious it is and how big of an issue it is for people coming into this town, that they really want to see trees, and how important it is to capture these people and not let them drive through and move to another community. There's a lot of things that Trees for Watertown could do. I mean, as sitting on the board of directors at Rotary Club, the Watertown Community Foundation, we would very much enjoy this group to speak at our meetings, and we would even be happy to coordinate some sort of an effort through the town, through the Watertown Community Foundation's block parties that we have every year. I think there's about 10 of them that they do. You could incorporate a yard cleanup function with the block party, it instills community. You could also encourage tree planting in the neighborhoods. And I'm telling you, it would be huge. There are neighborhoods all over that would really enjoy that, and I would like to.
Well, you know, to just pick up on that point, I mentioned that I was involved in sort of the founding of Trees for Watertown in the early 1980s, and one of the things that, you know, that we encouraged then is that this problem of where you put the trees in relationship to the sidewalk and the street is very complex, and in some parts of town, there's really literally there's no place to put it on the normal tree apron, and so we encourage people to put it on the private property side of the sidewalk, which is actually perfectly legal. The town can actually plant it and it still maintains its responsibility. And the tree actually does much better because it's not in what we call that death strip.
That's exactly correct.
And so, you know, it just requires a little bit of creative thinking and a little bit of organization. And I think that there are, you know, even when you're faced with all of this, you know, paving over former tree pits, we can get trees into those neighborhoods, and it's going to require some novel, creative thinking. But I think Trees for Watertown is up for that, and it's you know, it's a challenge, but I think it can be done.
That's definitely a good way to get out into the community. So I would encourage that.
Susan?
Yeah, nobody on the panel mentioned stormwater and the importance of impervious surface, of not having everything paved over for stormwater recharge, which I don't really understand what that means. And when I was preparing for this, I tried to figure out if there was a way you could pinpoint in the budget what we pay for our storm sewers and try to connect that to how much pervious and impervious surface there was. And I didn't get there. Maybe somebody in the audience can say more about that. But we do have a stormwater advisory committee that was recently formed that's developing stormwater ordinances and really working to find ways to increase the pervious amount of surface in
Well,
town.
removing blacktop is how you start that process, you know, and that's really, you
Well,
know,
that's
less blacktop.
That is a great idea, and there's also places where you might want to park cars where there's new kinds of pavers that do allow water to go through. So there's some technologies that facilitate it.
I happen to have seen some technologies that are prevalent in the Seattle area, but could be used here in warmer weather. And for instance, I live on Hall Avenue and the water rushes right down and passes all the drains and goes to Belmont Street. So what you do is you actually install something like bricks, and then you plant dirt there and plant material that would pick up the water and get rid of some of the toxins there. And so it slows down all the water getting into our drain systems.
Of course, it would also slow down the cars. And some of us, as we look at street architecture in Watertown, can't help believing that the objective of streets in Watertown is to attract the largest number of cars to come here and drive through the town at the highest possible rate of speed. So it seems to me we'd have a win-win if we went in that
It's the opposite of traffic calming that we have here in Watertown.
Well, that was the mandate of traffic 30 years ago. There were state laws that required that was how you build roads. And it's really a change in thinking that is sort of slow to be integrated into the roads.
Ken?
I want to change the direction of the conversation. I just have two thoughts that I want to put out there. One is in response to Mari's comment about will there be shade in your lifetime, and having planted quite a number of trees and watched them grow, one of the really lovely things about tree planting is that it is intergenerational. And you really don't do it for us, but you do it for the next generation, yet they grow remarkably quickly once they're planted, and a thrill to watch. And on in planting trees, and in response to Elizabeth's comment and what's going on, it's you know, I feel like I must be in outer space because I wasn't aware of the trees coming down along Victory. I wasn't aware of the trees coming down at the Lowell, other than the big ones last year or 2 years ago. But there's a lot of space right around the Lowell where trees could be planted. And as I'm listening to this conversation, I'm remembering An experience I had as a graduate student at Boston University, living in Brookline off of Kent Street. And off of Kent Street in Brookline, there is the most magnificent ground on a divided street that is a European beach park. And I would go to that European beach park, right at Longwood, and I would go to that European beach park and I would take my books and I'd climb up in a tree and I'd lay on a branch. They were big enough, you could just climb up, I would take a nap, I would read. And I've taken my daughters there as just this magical, magical place. I have no earthly idea how long it takes a European beach to grow to maturity. But once it's there are few things on earth to compare.
Those were planted in the 1830s.
All right, that was 180 years ago. We can do it. So what?
And what's amazing about that is it really is thinking about the trees. And this is what trees need, and we never give them what they really need, that little strip between the sidewalk and the, you know, and then we cut it on either side, so it's only a meter square. There's just not, those trees are only gonna live 10 or 15 years.
Is there a space like that, Peter, on the Lowell property where there's so much land and trees coming down? What a thing for children to have. What a gift we could give to a next generation and a generation after generation after that to have that kind of magical place.
And less mowing of lawns.
I want to plead that it's the school committee you need to talk to about that, not the town council.
But Trees for Watertown will be the advocate.
Louise.
I want to direct a question to Elizabeth. You know, I'm a landscape designer, and I've been looking at this Nichols Avenue property quite a bit, and it was an old gas station. And so up until 2 weeks ago, if you looked in the back, there was a cement pad, and it's now been removed. So as I've been designing this property, I had that section for children. In my mind, we were not removing that cement, and I had all these glorious rhododendrons and trees. So my question to Elizabeth is, could her children be a design team? And could they help us create a beautiful edge there that would be a play area? Because I've already always said you need a digging area for children, but I would like to take it to a different level, and I wondered if your group could help.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think just watching kids is inspiring, but I think kids would have a great role in that, and they could think about or help choose the shrubs so that they could play in the shrubs. I think that's a great idea. Thanks.
Okay. Let me do one thing back to the panel, and then I'm going to open it up in general. I think Ken, too. Ken got us started on this interesting challenge of Trees for Watertown is here as sort of the Watertown centerpiece of thinking about trees and doing advocacy and getting data and so on. But it is like most organizations, always, you know, there are never quite enough people to give you alternatives in the election of the presidents, that the people who are working on projects are totally saturated just from the ones I look at. This notion of using partnerships with other organizations in town, not just the committees on the town in the town government, but other organizations in town that would find it helpful to have a set of tree experts and advocates intersecting with their agendas, whether they're community development or whatever. So let me just, before we open it up generally, ask across the panel, other observations of kinds of partnerships that you think might be exploitable, that Trees for Watertown and people who are in this agenda could use to leverage some of their energy and concerns through other organizations. Thoughts? Yeah.
I'm talking about a tree curriculum. It makes sense. I've been working on that in Cambridge for a couple of years, and I wonder if there's other people in this audience or in this panel that also could work on a curriculum according to grade. And
others?
I'm wondering if, you know, if you think about one of the greatest assets that we have in Watertown when it comes to trees is the Mount Auburn Cemetery. You know, and we don't often enough take credit for most of that's here in Watertown. And being able to perhaps leverage that and promote that as one of our, you know, a real asset in our community, you know, along with the Charles River and partnerships with you know, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, who has, you know, general responsibility for that, and being able to, you know, continue to create the recreational kinds of things like our bike path and, you know, active areas where people will get out and continue to be able to experience, you know, trees, and making sure we're bringing some of those elements in.
I would say I don't know how many of you remember the Watertown, the Charles River Walk that almost made it into the infrastructure budget of the Obama administration as recommendation by the DCR. I think that figuring out how to work creatively and constructively with the DCR, who own a huge amount of property within the Watertown, is really important, and paying attention to that relationship and really trying to get that functional, get them to do what they're supposed to do in terms of maintenance. I think that is a really important idea, and we made a huge progress on it up to about 2 years ago, and then when that project didn't make the cut, a lot of that energy is dissipated. So I think we need to pick that up.
One thing I would love to see, and I have a friend who lives in a part of Watertown that doesn't have any trees on her street, and she on her own has tried to advocate and convince neighbors of the value of trees, but hasn't had luck because a lot of them don't see any value in trees. I would love to see something like the two Kens at the other end of the table, if they could, you know, I'm assuming we're preaching to the choir here, but if there was a way to organize a neighborhood meeting that maybe this parent and other people could pull together and have them speak, I think that would be so convincing. I can't imagine why people wouldn't want to plant trees after hearing them talk.
Yeah, I think the thing that arrested me first when looking at the article I referred to was that it was casting the general arguments that we all make about why trees are one of into immediate pocketbook terms that I could imagine making sense to some of the people that, at least in my little work in this, have just proven impervious to the sort of this end of the table arguments. And I'm wondering, so maybe Ken Mervis, last word, you're also the Energy Commission. How much do trees and their planting and their shading and insulation values figure in the Energy Commission's work of what you might invest in to make your home more energy efficient?
Well, that's a great question, Bill, because until you shared that article out of the Wilson Quarterly with me, I mean, I knew, but it had never landed on my radar. It was a learning moment. And I think to encourage people, and now what's going on in my mind is not just to plant, but what to plant, where to plant it, what are the long-term ramifications, how quickly can I get it there, because a tree doesn't happen overnight. And I think it will become a much more pivotal part of the conversation in terms of using the natural landscape to have an energy impact.
Susan? And then I'll open it up. Yep.
I gave Ruth a present recently. The little saying inside of my bottle cap on my cup of my tea bottle was, "The meaning of life is to plant trees that you will not live to see grow to maturity." Seemed like a nice summation to me of a lot of things people on the panel have said.
And yet, the emphasis on kids, which for me is new in panels and discussions of trees, and I'm grateful to see it coming up at least 3 different times here, strikes me that you need a complement to that. It's also, you know, planting the trees with your kids and other people's kids that they, in fact, will grow up with.
I also have an old people's quote.
Yes, I know. I'm really sympathetic with the old people. Gets to me, yes.
I have another story. There is a famous English gardener who said to his head gardener, you know, gardener means he hires people. He said to his head gardener one day, "I want to plant a such and such tree." And the owner was 85 years old. And the head gardener said, "But sir, that tree takes 60 years to reach maturity." And the gardener said, or the owner said, "Well, better plant it today."
Okay.
Actually, I have a story about trees.
It's clearly time to engage the audience because we're getting into
William
story
McDonough
time.
has a short essay about design, and in it he talks about a cathedral, a 350-year-old cathedral, with the oak superstructure is succumbing to dry rot. And oh my God, where are we going to find more of this oak to replace it? And the caretakers of the property had planted those oaks when the cathedral was built. So they were now fully mature, 350 years old, ready to replace the old ones, and time to plant new ones.
Let's hear it for the Watertown Planning Commission. Okay, open it up. If you wish to speak, come up in front of that microphone. All these hands and so on. Say who you are and either questions which end with a question mark soon or statements that end with a period soon.
Yes, Dennis Duff from Spruce Street. First of all, as a board member of Trees for Watertown, I wanted to thank you for all your comments and your insights. And my background, I have a degree in horticulture and an advanced degree in landscape architecture. And I still learn something. As the head of the Department of Landscape Architecture at LSU once stated, we're all graduate students. We're always learning. So I appreciate all your comments. Excuse me for being a little outspoken, but that's part of my nature. There's an old saying about putting your money where your mouth is. So to Mr. Shetty, I would greatly appreciate if you could meet with Rotary, or with the Trees for Watertown, meet with Rotary and maybe donate money to do plantings. We're presently looking at planting a strip in front of the gas station in Coolidge Square, which some have noticed that the Department of Public Works put a granite